115 on the button. Let's get started. This is moderated usability testing. Quick way to purge your assumptions. I want to first thank everybody for being here. I think it's pretty clear what the actual new hotness is. Moderated usability testing, right? But jokes aside, this is a good session for the afternoon of the second day. It's not really highly technical. It's much less cerebral, but it's some good information. And what I'm actually hoping to get out of this is one of those sessions where hopefully you're going to be able to get some ideas about what you can start doing immediately when you get back to your office, and immediately when you start back on that project that you're way through that you left off to come to this event, and it's something that you can just really take and start to make part of your regular practice. I really think you can be valuable in that, and definitely appreciate you being here. Just a rough speaker count. I think we have about 85 people. So my name is Jeremy Upton. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm married with 2 boys. I started working in FileMaker in 1998 on FileMaker 4. First certification of FileMaker wasn't until version 14, which I got when I joined Skeleton Key, which will this year be 9 years that I've been with them. I came on with them as just a general developer. I have since been brought up to be the director of project success, which means I'm not allowed to code anymore, at least not on the client stuff. But it means that I lead the team of project leads who are product owners and designers, and conduct discoveries, interviews with clients, general UX research, and then we hand off things to engineering to be developed. So basically, we decide the what is going to be developed, and they decide the how. So that is, in addition to being certified up through the current version of FileMaker, I also hold a UX certification through the Nielsen Norman Group. One of the namesakes of which is Don Norman, author of the Design of Everyday Things. He's considered the grandfather of human-centered design. He actually coined the term user-friendly. So really great, really interesting character of him. That's one of my careers. My second career is as a classically trained musician. I actually have a master's degree in music performance. This year will mark my 20th season with the Memphis Symphony Orchestra. That one is me.
You didn't want to share your achievements.
Well, no, I'm getting to that. But yeah, if you came in late, an icebreaker that I asked the room before we started was, "What's your proudest achievement that doesn't mean anything to anybody else? That is just meaningless."
That means a lot to a lot of people.
That's not it. It's actually coming though. So you could say I take music seriously. Another thing I take seriously is Halloween costumes. This is one of my more recent creations of Jack Skellington. I take Halloween costumes very seriously. And my third one, and this is my proudest achievement that no one else cares about. I take my tabletop gaming very seriously. Does anyone in the room by chance heard of the game or familiar with the game Cosmic Encounter? Anybody? That's all right. I like it enough for all of us. So this is me competing in the Galactic Tournament. That's right, not national. Galactic Tournament. It was a 2-day event held in Washington, D.C. in 2018. The Galactic Tournament of Cosmic Encounter, a tournament which I won. So that is my proudest achievement that no one else cares. So I like to walk around. We're supposed to stay by the podium. That's going to be so hard for me. I've got to walk around. Let's talk about the problem. And let me start by talking about how the problem manifested in my personal experience. And maybe you had a similar experience. I was finding at one point in my career, I was spending weeks, maybe even months with clients, talking to them about what we're going to be developing, having regular meetings with them, showing them pictures of what we're developing, showing them the software as it's being developed, and basically doing this whole, discovery and design process with them. And then it would get deployed. And on day one, there were 100 change requests. Familiar? Anybody else?
Based it.
And that was a good scenario sometimes. Sometimes we would deploy it and we wouldn't hear anything. And we're thinking, yes, I guess everything's all right. And then we check in a couple weeks later, maybe a month later, and they just haven't been using it. It's just been sat and no one's touched it, right? And I was like, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? Did we not just spend weeks together talking about this thing? Why is this not just going right into your workflow, right? And I started to tell myself a lie. And the lie sounded something like this. If I can just get good enough at visual design, people will want to use the software I made. And not just want to use it, but they'll enjoy using it. If I can just get adept enough at the newest design techniques, the Apple human interface design or Google material design, if I could just get good enough at the use of drop shadows and padding and color schemes and use of white space and all of that, if I can get good enough at that, then they will like what I design and they will want to use it and they'll even enjoy using it. But this was a lie. Because how pretty the design is not actually why people want to use software, right? It helps, but it's not really why they want to use software. People want to use software that meets them right where they are. Okay, so what do I mean by that? The kind of experience that humans find enjoyable when they're interacting with software is one where as soon as their brain has a need, the software answers it. Maybe without them even having to ask for it, right? So that is something we have to tackle. So this brings us to the real problem. What I didn't realize is despite the time that I had spent with the client in design discussions and even like showing mock-ups and doing things like that, when I was releasing this software, it was chock full of assumptions. A lot of assumptions in there. And there are always assumptions. They are unavoidable. And the reason is because we're all human and we all consider ourselves to be pretty good representatives of how humans think, right? We're also kind of naturally self-indulgent. And so when we are designing software, maybe without even realizing it, we're putting all kinds of assumptions in. And the assumptions can manifest in any number of different ways. It can be like placements of buttons. It can be the order of operation to complete a process. It can be the type of feedback that is necessary to convey what we're trying to convey to the user. We're making assumptions all the time about the way the software should work. And when those assumptions are incorrect, that's when you get under change request on the release day, right? So our goal is to purge these assumptions. Because we generally, if left to our own devices, are going to design for the way that we want people to behave. Or in worst case, we design them for the way that we behave. Anyone familiar with the term Norman Door? So Don Norman, this is a quote from Don Norman. This is the Don Norman from the Nielsen Norman Group. There's a term that was coined kind of after him. And a Norman door is one where it is not really clear if you're supposed to push or pull, right? The doors in this room are Norman doors. Right? Just to get that out there. So you run into things like this. What was the assumption in the design of this handle? Maybe it was if we put the word push over the handle, that's enough to convey that you're supposed to push, right? But how many people think walk up to that and grab that handle and pulls, right? Mm-hmm. This was an assumption that made its way into a design. We have to design for the way that people actually behave, not for the way that we want them to behave. Now, if you're like me, you might be thinking, or like I mentioned before, I do a long discovery process. We do user interviews, we do mock-ups, we do all these things. We feel pretty good that by the time we get to actually building the software that we've pretty much gotten rid of the assumptions. We can feel good about what we release. Well, it's not actually true. You can't ever actually get where there are no remaining assumptions. You may have heard of Zeno's paradox. This is where a runner can never actually catch up to a tortoise because the runner can always make up half the distance remaining between them and the tortoise, and so can never actually pass them. In the actual physical world, obviously this is not true. When it comes to designing software, 100% true. And if you think about it, the reason is, as you're having these discussions with a client of how you're going to be designing the software, every time your mental model changes of the way the software is going to look and act, so does theirs. And you can never actually arrive at that perfect level of understanding because it's a moving target. Every time you think something new, like, oh yeah, that would be good, we could do that, they're also thinking, oh yeah, they could do that. And it doesn't look exactly like your mental, right? And this gap in between is full of assumptions. Those are the things that you're just going to be like, it's a lure, put it in there, right? Sometimes without even realizing it. So we need a way to purge the assumptions. First of all, that's going to be quick. I mean, yeah, you could spend a ton of time in discovery and a ton of time doing user interviews and going over things. And maybe you could get rid of 99.9% of those assumptions. But how long did that take? I think weeks to actually knock out every little detail. And even then, there's still some left. So we need a way to purge these assumptions quickly, and we need a way to purge them accurately. Doesn't do any good if it's fast, if they're not accurate, right? And maybe more importantly, we need to purge them cheaply. And by cheaply, I mean early, right? Some people, you might hear people say, well, this is what user acceptance testing is for, right? So we've designed it and we put it out there and they do their testing and we get their feedback. When does user acceptance testing happen? Here? Here?
Keep going.
Yeah.
Maybe? Yeah, right? This is way too late. This is way too expensive. This is called cost of defects. It could just easily be called cost of unpurged assumptions, right? This is way too late. We need them purged. Here. Not quite a requirement. That's a little too early. What we're talking about is really right in this area. We need them purged early so that they will be cheap. So my goal today is to convince you that you need to be doing moderated usability testing because every other method of purging design assumptions is slower, more expensive, and or less active. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not saying stop doing user interviews, stop making mock-ups and show and tells, and stop doing user acceptance testing. All of those are valuable things. We absolutely need to be doing those. But when it comes to purging those assumptions, those kinds that can bite us in the end when we deploy, that there isn't a method that is faster, cheaper, or more accurate than moderated usability testing. At the risk of overselling this, if done correctly, moderated usability testing can give you a insight into the mind of the user to where they're giving you feedback and they don't even realizing that they're giving it to you. If done correctly, it really can be a Jedi mind trick, right? You will tell me what to design. Let's talk about what it is. Just show of hands real quick. Does anyone right now know what moderated usability testing is? No one? Okay, good. Great audience. So first of all, it's moderated. All right. It's not. It means you're there for it. You are present. You're in the room or you're on the Zoom call watching it happen. This isn't, here, take this software and go test it and come back with your feedback later. No. You're there. You're watching it happen. Okay. So this is a time that you are present. It is a qualitative test of a prototype, not completed software. Not here, but here, right? We're in prototype phase. And the reason it's a prototype is because it's early. It's early in the design process. This is how we keep it cheap. It's really cheap to make changes early, very much more expensive, maybe even 100 times more expensive to make them late. And it's with end users. There is no other acceptable test subject for moderated usability testing. It does absolutely zero good to probe the mind of the stakeholder. Who cares what that person's mind thinks? It's the end users. We need to get the software in front of them, have their mind give us that feedback. let's do one right now. I'm going to need a volunteer. Someone that doesn't mind speaking up with nice clear voice. Can you do it? Okay, sure. Can you speak? You don't have to move. You can stay right there. Right. It's fine. Just make sure you speak clearly so everyone hears you. And you're going to be on YouTube. That's okay. All right.
Wouldn't be the first time.
So what we're going to do really quick, I'm going to show you really how easy these are to do. I'm going to run through the entire process of a moderated usability test here in really maybe 60 seconds. Okay. What is your name?
Sheldon.
Sheldon? Okay. Thank you, Sheldon, for volunteering. You're okay being on YouTube. That's good. I want you to know that this is not going to be a test of you. All right. We do not require it. You don't have any skills that are going to come to bear here. This is purely a test of a design. Okay. And in this case, the design that I'm going to have you test is a single slide from a fictional presentation. All right. Now, when you look at this slide, I'm going to ask you to do two things for me. I'm going to ask you to tell me what is the subject that we're going to be discussing during that slide. And the second thing is I want you to tell me what is going to be the subject of discussion in the next slide in the presentation. Okay. And just so I make sure we get the right understanding, tell me back in your own words what I'm going to have you do.
You're going to show me a slide. You're going to ask me what we're going to be talking about while that slide is up. And then you're going to ask me what my expectation is of what the next topic of discussion will be.
You got it. You got it. Now, this is probably the most critical part. When you're doing that, when you're striving to answer those questions, I need you to think out loud. Okay? Don't just blurt out the answer if you think you know it. I actually need to hear you thinking. I need you to point out things that you notice. Okay? I think the next slide is going to be about this because of this that I've noticed. All right. So it's very, very important that you speak out loud. Okay. Do it. I need everyone else in the room to stay absolutely silent. Okay. I'm not testing your minds. I'm testing Sheldon's mind. All right. Sheldon's mind. All right. Last thing I want you to know before I present you with the slide is that I am also not going to say anything. Okay. I'm going to remain silent. You're going to be doing this as if I weren't here. Okay. If you have any questions, I'm not going to answer it.
Okay.
If for some reason or another you don't think you can answer, you can't come up with a good answer, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I don't know. Right, very good. Are you ready? I'm ready. Remember to think out loud.
Thinking out loud. There's a lot of outdoors. There's a giraffe. And it says mammals. So I'm thinking we're talking about animals. We're talking about animals in Africa because there's a giraffe. There's a map of Africa. It does say African behind the giraffe. I can sort of just about see that. It's a very brightly coloured giraffe. So the impression it's giving me is that it's quite a lively conversation. It doesn't seem scientific. It seems more sort of ethereal talk about animals. And it looks like the next slide, because of what is on the bottom right-hand corner that says next, which is kind of a giveaway, is going to be about non-giraffes. And it looks like that's an outline of a crocodile, and it says reptiles above it. So I'm guessing we're moving from mammals to reptiles.
Moderated usability test done. Thank you. You bet. Appreciate it. So I give it to Phil. Good job. Sheldon able to complete the task I gave him? Successful test? Yes. Great. Let's do another one. Let me get a different volunteer. You can do it for me? All right. All right. So I'm not going to go through the whole instruction phase. You heard it. It's going to be the exact same kind of thing. I want you to tell me what is this slide going to be about and what is the next slide going to be about. Okay. And think out loud while you do it. Everyone else remain silent. Right.
So in Africa, we see different type of life forms in many ways, reptiles, giraffe. There's a piece about the ecosystem and how maybe it may work together. They're coming together to build ecosystem in which they all live in. Mostly focused on the continent of Africa. My assumption of what the next slide might be is maybe breakdown of each one of these 4 parts and go into the details and how they are part of the ecosystem and how they fulfill their roles.
That's complete. Thank you. You feel like you accomplished what I tasked you with? Are you confident that you did it?
The best of what I can, the best what I'm given. Yes.
Yeah. Do we feel like that was a successful test?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was absolutely a successful test. Now, this was kind of set up. This was kind of predetermined for you to fail.
Haha.
Right. But he actually didn't. He actually wasn't correct with what was in my mind, right? But that was a great test. Because if done correctly, absolute worst case in a moderated usability test is that you learn that your design is bad, and that is great. Because it's happening early, it's happening quickly, and it's happening cheaply, suppose it. Fast, cheap, accurate, right? Very good news to learn that there was something wrong with my design. Now, to compare and contrast this with some of the other techniques that we may use to purge assumptions, I want to start talking a little bit about what moderated usability testing is not. Imagine if I had done that second slide as a show and tell of a mock-up. All right, I'm just going to go back to it really quick here. Curia, this is the design of the slide that we have for you today. So basically the idea here is this slide is going to be about African reptiles. So at the top of the slide, we're going to talk about them. This is intended to convey what the next couple slides are going to be about. The next one, we're going to proceed to African mammals, then we'll get to African insects, and then we'll move on to African flora. And in the end, we'll talk about how they all interrelate. Does that make sense? And of course, it makes sense. I just explained it to you. But does that mean it's a good design? If what I'm trying to convey is what I'm talking about next, and after that, is this a good design? Did I get a nice positive response from my client? Yeah, it makes sense. Of course it makes sense. When you explain it, it makes sense. It may even very well, in reality, it does make sense to them. But does that mean that they're going to be able to pass on to the next person how the design works? When I'm not there to explain it, as this game of telephone goes on from user to user to user, are they eventually going to be like, what's this slide about, right? So just because we got a positive response from a show and tell doesn't mean that it can be believed. No one wants to look stupid. If I'm the designer, the professional designer, and I explain it to you, and I'm like, does that make sense? What are you going to be like, no. You're like, yeah, I follow. Even if you maybe don't, you're like, so in a show and tell, which there are values to show and tell, but when it comes to purging assumptions about the design, it's not to be believed. You can't get accurate information out of it. So does this make sense? Doesn't fit. This is not a show and tell. We're not explaining the design. In a similar vein, this question. What do you think? No, I cringe every time I hear a designer ask this question. By the way, this question should never be asked at any point, right? But the reason is there's no good answer to this question. You don't want an answer to this question. What do they think? Well, they like it. Can you believe that? Maybe they don't want to hurt my feelings. I spent a lot of time on the design. And we're like, yeah, well, you did a good job. I get a nice pat on the back, but is it useful information? Is it purging assumptions? No. What if you're being asked that question and your boss is in the room? And your boss paid a lot of money for this project, and you're not about to be the person to derail the project by saying that you don't like it. There's all kinds of reasons that you're not going to get accurate information, even if they say, yes, they like it. What if they don't like it? What do you do with that? You basically got one of two options. If you get a no, I don't like it, you can get defensive. You can start defending your design and explaining it. That does wonders for the relationship. Or maybe you capitulate. What would you do differently? If that's the case, you better hope that the boss is not in the room, because they're going to start thinking, who's this professional designer that I'm paying all this money to design when apparently my own people can do it just as well? There is no good answer to what do you think about this. Now, it's inevitable, honestly, that you're going to get opinion-based feedback when you're doing this. Even when you're doing a proper moderate usability test, you're going to get some. It's inevitable. It comes out. But there's a good way to respond to it, right? So give me some negative feedback about my presentation so far, whatever order you want. Make it up. It's
Vague.
big.
It doesn't feel like it has purpose.
Okay. I would appreciate that feedback. That's very insightful, especially from you. I'm definitely going to take that into consideration. They feel validated. I'm under no obligation to actually give a review of what they think. So you can kind of judo move if it comes out, but you definitely want to ask for it. If you ask for it, you got to deal with it, right? So, keep going. Another thing that is not intended to create shared understanding. Shared understanding. It's so hot right now. Such a buzzword. We have to have shared understanding. What are you talking about? Our goal is not shared understanding. In a moderated usability test, the goal is not shared understanding. Now you might say, well, hang on, these are the end users. Don't we want the end users to have understanding? Don't we care about maybe even what they think? Honestly, at this phase, no. We don't. Not during this test specifically. Let me tell you why. 2 reasons. 1, this is a prototype. This is early in the design phase. This design is going to be changing. So any level of understanding that my test subject may have gained or any opinion they may have developed is based on partial information. So I appreciate it. Not really applicable. You don't know all the facts, right? I don't need them to come away with an understanding of how the software is going to work in the end. That's not what I'm testing. This is just a prototype. The second reason is it's not the kind of feedback I'm looking for. Like I said, I'm not looking for them to come away with an understanding. The reason I'm doing this usability test is that I want to get a probe into the brain of the end user to understand how they think and answer the question, can they use my design or not? And I know that that answer is going to be accurate because it's completely unfiltered. It's untainted by the desire to please, personal opinions, the desire to not feel stupid. All of that just goes away. They're simply tasked with doing something in the software, and they either can or they can't. Either way, I got good information. I come away with all kinds of new understanding. Whatever level of understanding they gained is immaterial. So I want to show you some real world examples. I've got 3 different recordings here of actual client usability tests performed by Skeleton Key with real clients. We got their permission to do this. You're going to see on here a couple different prototypes of varying levels of fidelity. Just in case the questions in your mind of how we did these are prototypes we created in Balsamic. And by the way, let me pause for 1 second, just to let you know, the purpose of this session really is to convince you that this is something worth doing. The how to actually carry it out is all in the material that's in this session. So you're going to get some material in the package if you download it that walks you through those steps that I did with Sheldon here and you know, kind of laying it out, giving the prompts, making sure everyone knows not to talk and they know I'm not going to talk and all of that. It walks you through all that. It gives you some resources on where you can do prototyping, some good platforms that work well, some general tips and ideas. So you're going to get all of that. So if you're kind of wondering like, whoa, how do we do this? That'll be available to you. And anytime that we're here, feel free to pull me aside and talk shop. We can talk about it there. But you're going to see some real world examples here. So in this first one, you won't hear any of the setup, a mid test in this one. This is a fairly high fidelity prototype that we built. You are going to hear me talk in this one, but it's because we had a large number of tasks that we were giving them. And instead of front loading them at the beginning with a whole bunch of things, I would give them one at a time. They would do it, and I'd say, okay, your next task is now this. So you will hear me talk on that, but you're going to hear the client talking out loud as well. All right. The next task is I want you to add a new note record.
Add a new note. I see notes up in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to click on notes, and there's a plus sign to add a note. I'm going to click on that, and then, okay, cool. Save. Looks like a new note was saved. And close out. Okay.
All right. And the last one is I want you to print the current occupancy report.
Print current occupancy report. Okay. Occupancy. I see. Let's see. Occupied. Also, I'm going to click on. So try to click on some of these buttons down by occupants. Maybe go to these three. Okay, 3 buttons or 3 dots. Click on that. Current occupancy report. Pretty straightforward.
All right. We talked about accuracy. Talk about speed. I'm going to replay the beginning of this one again here. My mouse up there where I can see it. All right. The next task is I want you to add a new note record.
Add a new note. I see notes up in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to click on notes, and there's a plus sign to add a note. I'm going to click on that, and then text. Okay, cool. Save. Looks like a new note was saved. And close out.
All right. Let's count the assumptions that we just purged. There was the assumption that putting the notes up at the top right of the screen and making it green would draw their attention enough. Confirmed. There was the assumption that they would realize that the word notes was clickable. Confirmed. That they would recognize that once they opened up that popover, that the plus sign at the bottom of that popover was how you added it. Confirmed. That they would recognize that the next step after clicking plus was to immediately start typing that new note. Confirmed. That they would recognize that when they were done, unlike normal FileMaker behavior, you actually had to click a save button to commit and save what you had just done. They saw that, they click save. Confirmed. That they would recognize that the new line in that little popover in that portal showing their newly created note was enough feedback for them to be confident that their note had been successfully saved. Confirmed. There was the assumption that at the end of all that they would recognize that the close button up at the top right of the window was how you get rid of the popover. Confirmed. We confirmed 6 to 7 assumptions in maybe 30 seconds. Now, all of those maybe you might say, well, those are kind of safe assumptions. That's pretty straightforward design and how that works. But those are the kind of things that can be wrong in some cases, right? We've definitely had clients where it's like, we don't seem to add notes. Notes isn't working. Notes isn't working. And it's because whatever method for committing and saving that note, they weren't seeing. Right? They weren't seeing the save button or whatever had been designed in that particular case, right? So these assumptions, while they seem minor, can create problems that are very expensive to fix later. Well, we knocked them out like this, one after another. And they didn't even realize they were doing it. I'm typing almost as fast as he can talk on everything that's being confirmed. And he's just like, okay, I do this. That was easy. What was the point? Is he really gaining any level of shared understanding? Maybe. Doesn't really matter because I'm learning all kinds of stuff. Now, watch what happens next because we get an assumption wrong. Okay. All right. And the last one is I want you to print the current occupancy report.
Print current occupancy report. Okay.
Where should the button to print the current occupancy report go? Probably. Here, right? Now, fancy designer, I was like, throw in the kebab menu. It's the kind of thing that belongs in the kebab menu, print reports. But remember, people enjoy using software that meets them right where they are. It will tell me what to design. So when I'm reviewing this video and we get to this part and I say print occupancy report and I see his mouse go, I'm like, bottom left, next occupants. Right? Because how much better of an experience is that for the end user? Now, he found it, right? He eventually got it there. He's like, oh, yep, there it is. Got it. Successful. I mean, the test was technically successful. He was able to do it. And you could even argue that, like, that means that the layout is discoverable enough that the average person would probably eventually land on. I'm going to get to questions at the end. I have to let you do that. But when we're trying to really create that experience where we meet the user right where they are, that's the kind of thing you look for. And that's the kind of feedback that they don't even realize they're getting. Just watching their mouse clicks. Right? I'm going to get questions at the end. I want to make sure I get through everything, and then there'll definitely be time. There's actually a great parallel to this kind of experience, because this rule about how people interact with things is not just for software, it's for anything that we can interact with, right? Imagine, like, do you like using the knobs or the buttons on your stove, or do you always have to remember which knob to switch burner, right? Or if you've ever driven a really nice car where you don't even have to look to find the stick shift, much less figure out how it was designed to work, right? These things that meet us right where we are. There's a great parallel in music, actually. A very common question that I get from people that aren't involved in orchestral music is they'll ask, what is the conductor really doing, right? I mean, you're professional musicians. You obviously know how to play. The music is written down for you. What are they doing? Are they just keeping beat? Or it might sound like what makes a good conductor? Well, the truth of it is, most of the time, we don't need the conductor. Most of the time, there's other things going on. We've got all kinds of audio cues coming our way. We've got visual cues out of our peripheral of other musicians moving, and we can move in sync with them, and we can keep our place. We can read the music. We can count, right? Most of the time, we actually don't need the conductor. But every once in a while, there's that moment in the music when a note has to be placed precisely, and the only source of authority of where that note is placed is the conductor, because they're in charge of everything. And in those moments, we got to look at the conductor. A good conductor, when you look at them, they're looking at you. Because they're so knowledgeable about the score that they know the moments in the music that every single instrument is going to need them. Those key moments that the oboe needs me, and the key moments that the first violins need me, and the key moments that the basses need me in the back. A good conductor, when you look at them, they're looking at you. The rule applies to software too. Look at the software and you need it. The software needs to be looking right back at you. That's what's going to create that pleasurable experience. And it's going to remove that friction. Usability testing like this is the only way to discover that kind of information. Let me see where we are in time. Let me get through these next two. We will have time for questions. Just want to make sure I get through them. A couple more. Now, this next one is a potential pitfall that you might run into in a usability test. This is a lower fidelity. This is probably even earlier in the design phase, so this is very much kind of wireframe. I think we even took like some screenshots of an existing layout, just kind of used them as a backdrop. This one, I believe you'll only hear the client talking in this one.
So now let's pretend like we're actually going to that web user accounts. This is like as if I was logged in with that privilege set. Oh, there it is, Bob. So Bob Newhart is what we're talking about here. And let's say we have some stuff we have to edit. So we have a 3 dots edit step there. And then we have their information. This is their 2FA phone number, and then their mobile phone number. So we do have 2FA as its own new field there. That's great. We see their address as they're recording it on their account. The thing I'm not seeing here, Jesse, is they have representative organization, but on their account, they also have something that tells us whether or not they're the representatives organization's primary contact. Is that something that we can see here, or a value to let us know whether or not they've got that on or off? You know what I'm saying? Like, they tell us that they're the representative organization, but they don't tell on an account. Let me see if I can. I'll come back to that. I'll ask questions about that later. I think that's the only thing I'm seeing there. Is I'm not sure
All
if
right. Don't you fall for it. They're going to ask questions. Even though you told them you're not going to answer, they're going to ask questions. They're going to see something and be like, why is this blue? I thought we were going to make this red. Why is that blue? You got to sit in that awkwardness, right? It seems like such a simple thing. The client's just like, hey, we talked about a field being there. I'm not seeing it. It's such a simple thing. Be like, oh, yeah. We'll get that in there next time, right? It seems like, well, how would that mess up anything? Well, what are you doing? As soon as you speak up and respond to their question, you have just ended the usability test and you've gone into design discussion, right? You're missing out on an opportunity to learn some really great information. What if you let them sit in that awkwardness and then see where they go to find what they can't find, right? So you're jotting down, oh yeah, I did forget to put that field on there. Where do they expect that field to be? Follow their mouse, top, left, got it, right? You can learn all kinds of information just by shutting up and not saying anything, right? You got to resist that urge to respond and sit in that awkwardness. This client is pretty trained at it. This might have been one of his early ones for the client that like once they kind of get the idea, they get it. But for sure, the first time you do this, they're going to ask you questions, right? You're going to want to respond. Last one I'll show here.
I'm going to go back to licenses this time, and this time
This
we're
was a
going to look at
mistake
the
that
new
was made.
advanced
This is a crash
search
and burn.
stuff. We're looking at rental license, and we have invoice status unpaid here. And this is the idea here is to get us a list of licenses that are unpaid, not just the invoices.
Real quick,
Yep.
and I'm not supposed to remain silent, I apologize, but what else do you notice here that's changed when you clicked on that? The term had been entered as well.
Oh, the term has to be entered as well. Oh,
No,
yeah,
I'm
the
sorry,
term
it was-
has been entered. Gotcha.
Yeah, during this
Gotcha.
interaction. Sorry, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, otherwise
Bad
it's going to look
practice to
through
state that.
everything. Yeah. Yep. Otherwise it's going to be looking at.
So this developer, he's a great guy. This developer, he told me later when he was apologizing, he wasn't apologizing to the client. He was apologizing to me because he knew I would see the video. Right? He asked the question, hey, when you click that, did you notice the other thing that happened? What's the answer to that question? No, they didn't. If it's important that they notice that, you need to change your design. Pointing it out to them tells you nothing, right? That's not purging an assumption. That's just teaching them about the design. Doesn't mean it's a good one, right? There was absolutely no point in speaking up and asking if they notice something. They either do or they don't. Write down either way and make a change if needed, right? That's a crash and burn in that case. Now, I don't remember what happened for the rest of this, but basically that the end of the test, and now we're in design discussion, right? A missed opportunity to really get some good insight. So, when it comes to purging assumptions, moderated usability testing really does kind of reign king. All of these other things have values of their own, but when it comes to purging assumptions, user interviews and design discussions, talk is cheap, sure. It's accurate to a point. You're never going to get them all, like we've talked about. Remember Zeno's paradox. You're never going to purge them all through discussions. So it maxes out at a certain level of accuracy, and it's not fast. It takes forever to talk about things. Imagine how long it would take to talk through how the add notes function was going to be on that first prototype. You know the entire discussion we had about that part before that, prior to that test? Does the user need to be able to add notes on this layout? Yes. Moving on. Right? Imagine how long it would take to talk through all of those steps. Show and tells are also cheap. You can put them together pretty quick, and they're fast to show. We've demonstrated they're not accurate. You can't believe what you're getting when people give opinion-based feedback. when you ask them, does it make sense, the thing that you just explained to them? It's not accurate in purging assumptions. User acceptance testing. It's accurate and it's fast. It is not cheap. You're going to very quickly learn that your budget just got blown out of the water. Right? Moderated usability testing is all three: cheap, accurate, and fast. So my encouragement is to add it to your practice. Let's get some Q&A. Here we go. All right. I know that you were first. I want to start with you.
I think you touched on it a little bit already, but my question was, when a customer does something different than the way that you assumed it was going to happen, when do you engage into that conversation of why or what their suggestions are? Do you do it like after the usability testing? Or?
Yeah, as soon as the test is done, you can circle right back around and go into design. I noticed that you went over there looking for such and such button. I'm like wondering, why did you go over there? You can ask all kinds of questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. Who was second? There was someone who was second. Was it you? Okay.
Back to that other slide, when you asked him to do the occupancy report, he went down here and then he finally went up to that menu. He gaslit himself a little bit. He's like, he's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
When,
Yeah. Did it get there? It makes sense though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that might have been. I want to say it was an attempt to please, because I don't think it was that. But you're right. Like it definitely told us that yes, it's probably okay to put it there, and if the layout gets really cluttered, chalk that as one that is probably safe to move off if we need the space.
Right.
But it really should be right where his mouse went, right? Yeah. Who is next? You in the back.
Jeremy, great session. Thank you. Well done. I just wanted to add a point, actually, a comment. Way back, slide 3. You're talking about moderated user testing and the fact that realistically the only people involved are the user and the tester. The user tests. So the user tests, the tester does nothing.
The end user is the only acceptable subject of the test. Yeah.
I just wanted to make the point that it's absolutely critical to bring your stakeholders along with you. I could tell you stories of corporates we've taken into moderated user testing, all for it, but then they didn't like the results, so they didn't build that way. So I guess the point that I just wanted to make was that it's very important to keep good notes. It's very important to back up your design decisions with this testing, because if a stakeholder takes one look at something and says, no, I don't like that,
Yeah.
you have to be able to prove that it is actually
You saw him do it. Yeah, I've had stakeholders come to me and say, we need to change how that works. And I'm like, why? It worked. Is there something that didn't work about it? And I had that ammo. And a great thing about this, you remember, if we're doing a mock-up or asking opinions, the fact that the stakeholders in the room can taint responses,
100%.
it doesn't taint anything here. They can either do it or not. Doesn't matter who's in the room, right? Yeah. All right. Let me just start here. And I think you had your hand up.
Yeah. So do you have any guidance for when a customer is unwilling or very resistant to give you access to their end users? Yeah. Because, usually there's various political and, their own internal political reasons.
Show them that. You'd be like, listen, we've budgeted already. That's part of our estimate. Time to spend with your end users and do this testing. If you're saying that we aren't going to be able to do that, then we need to probably adjust our budget, because we're going to have a very heavy user acceptance testing period. And just be honest with them. This is our profession. This is what we do. If you tell me that I cannot access end users until the end, I'm going to have a really big usability budget, user acceptance testing budget. Yeah. Usually that's enough. I don't know if I've had anyone be like, yep. Even after that, right? Who's next?
Do you ever have any difficulty with, I don't want to see it till it's done. I get that a lot. I don't want to test my piece of it unless I can test the whole thing. I want to test from conception to invoicing.
Yeah.
I don't want to do these little onesie twosies, because if I don't see it all, it doesn't make sense. So how do you kind of talk them around? Is it this same thing again?
So I've had people say things like that. It usually wasn't an argument against wanting to do something like this, as long as I preface it with this is not everything. This is just one piece.
Yeah.
But I need to make sure this works quickly so I can get it to engineering and they get it right. And they're like, oh, okay. And they just go along with it. Yeah. I haven't had anyone just like stand firm and be like, I'm not even going to look at it till the full thing. I guess if they did, same kind of thing.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Awesome.
When you're doing the notes piece, you mentioned like 6 assumptions you had noticed that you had knocked down. Did you actually enter into before they do that, do you have a list of assumptions that you hope to check?
Sometimes there's assumptions I didn't even realize I put in there. Right? And I'll see a behavior. I'm like, oh, shoot. I didn't realize I'd even done that. So sometimes I'll have a list of things I want to confirm. You definitely want to record these things for sure, because you're going to want to go back and check, because you'll see things that they'll do. Yeah. Yeah.
How many do you typically do this with, like one end user, or do you get multiple ones for the same screen? Like if our user base is like we have younger people and then older people, are we trying to like get one from each of those groups?
I'm glad you asked that. This is also, I think, on that tips and tricks thing, just so that you'll have it. But I'm really glad you asked it. There's a term called anchoring, and that's where once a user has seen an interface, even a prototype, they become kind of anchored to it. You can usually only get one good test out of any one user. If I come back to that same user with an updated version of how to add notes, they're just gonna be like click, 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 like that, right? And they might even think out loud because they know it already. They actually have gained some level of understanding that I almost wish they hadn't, right? So you have to be very tactful about when you do it. It's really great if you've got a whole lot of end users to pull from. We're actually one of the struggles that we have at Skeleton Key is oftentimes we'll have end user groups that are only like 5 people total. It's like, I've got to be really tactful with when I do my usability testing, because I've got 5 good ones in my pocket. And so I can't test everything. I've got to kind of pick my battles. But yeah, because it's not a really good idea to test a single person more than once, unless it's on a completely different interface, right? Yeah.
When it comes to the issue of the occupancy report, where the user can find where that button is to tap on it, when you have refined that UI, you come back to that user and see how long it takes them to find it now. Like, because you didn't tell me you're going to move it. You just observed that it should be moved.
Right.
You go back to that user and go like, can I do that one more time to see if your
Just see if it's catching
time is right? Yeah.
That, not in a usability test. I mean, it kind of depends on who that user is. Are they like a really critical user that's going to be training other people? They need to know that it's actually in a different place than they made up where I'm seeing it. I think more likely we would get a different user and put it in the different place and see if it's a common pattern that they do that they go down to the bottom left.
And that satisfies your assumption. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. If 2 people do it, like, yeah, that's where it needs to be. Yeah.
If you're adapting an already pre-established layout to a different platform, and you decided to just basically do a lot of the same functionality just on that new on the web, would this not really work, especially since the users have already been using that previous layout for a couple of years now?
My kind of rule of thumb for my team is if you are touching interface, it's worth doing a prototype. Yeah. Now, it can always be something that's just like stupid small, like we're changing the notes button from text to an actual kind of oval looking button. That's fine. Whatever. Don't do a prototype. But yeah, if you're changing interface, then you're making assumptions. How comfortable are you with those assumptions? When are they going to get purged? Right? Take time. We're good. That's 6 minutes.
Do you find it better or more useful to do these in person and have that recorded, or to do a video call screen recording, have that recorded? Or do you get different types of feedback in the different views?
No, in fact, we have only ever done remote over Zoom, and it worked fine. Balsamic, which is generally what we use, we picked Balsamic because it's inexpensive, very low barrier to entry. It's not like Figma that you got to like learn how to use Figma. Balsamic you can pretty much just come right into and start using, and it integrates directly with Jira. So I have a Jira issue for the creation of the new notes module. There's my prototype, just stick it right in there. But yeah, those shared screens and doing it that way, that works perfectly well. Yeah.
How do you handle conflicting stuff?
Like two different people do two different things. Yep. It might be time to do a third person.
But your user group is only two, so
You're feeling too. Be like, you guys got to fight. But like you better. Okay, so if you're yeah. I mean, I suppose that could be a thing. If you absolutely can't get a good read on what people do, then sometimes you just got to kind of fall onto your experience as a designer. People generally understand what kebab menus are and how to find things, so we're going to go with that.
When in the notes part where you asked him to make a note, he kind of went to he saw the notes, but he sort of went to the three dots before he clicked on the notes.
Yeah.
That would make me like question, should they be separated, or should there be something in that menu, or how do you decide at what point to make a change versus not make a change? Because
how minute of a detail do you care about?
Yeah.
You gotta pick your battles. Yeah. I mean, it may have been that he was fishing for some kind of mouse over text to pop up that would maybe clue him in. Wasn't totally sure. You just gotta pick it. It is possible, just like, okay, he hovered over this for 0.5 seconds and over this for a quarter of a second. And then, you can get into that, but usually you hit a point of diminishing returns. Look for the big pictures.
If you're working on a larger system with a number of iterations or even a number of releases, do you maintain the same level of testing throughout, or as you establish a design language, do you start to drop down because you've already established?
Yeah, it drops down. If we've established that they understand how to add a new note using a green button with a little popover and a plus button, well, now I can add new contacts to an invoice that same way. I can add new addresses to a contact in that same way. They understand that language. And so you're absolutely right. It can diminish as you kind of establish a language. Yeah.
What are you using for prototyping? Are you building it in FileMaker or other things?
Balsamic is what you saw. Yeah, all three of these were balsamic. Some of them probably looked very black and white FileMaker-y, and that's because they had an existing system in that case, and we actually screenshot their existing system and overlaid the changes we were making. So it kind of felt at home-ish to them, and they were able to look at the new stuff. All right. Great questions. Okay. Thank you. Here is going to be material. If you download the zip file from this session, and there's another page to it that has like links to resources, to videos and articles at the Nielsen Norman Group website that like Usability Testing 101 that covers a lot of stuff in there. Really great. And my last ask is to please fill out the survey for the session. I want you to know that I value your insightful feedback, and I'll definitely take it into consideration. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.